So a quick introduction. I think I needn't introduce myself again. I'll give it to Ajay to do a quick introduction.
Uh, Hi everyone. Basically, I work with IBM, but I'm associated with Istra as well, which is a non-profit organization. So we do a lot of research about information security areas and all that. And I have been into the industry for the last 10, 11 years. So
Hi everyone, my name is Ankur. I've been in the industry for over 18 years, started my career with network, moved on to security. For past 12 years, I'm associated with BT. I take care of all the global security projects, including all the industry, including some of the critical infra projects as well. Thank you.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I'm Colonel Inderjit, and I have almost 28 years of experience now, and 24 is into the defense forces, and thereafter into the corporate. And my focus areas generally is being into the CERT, SOC, and the smart city security perspective, which I generally talk on. Yeah.
Right. Thanks for the introduction. So we have pretty diverse panel over here with Colonel Inderjit Singh coming from defense background, and we are looking forward to key insights on critical infra from a national defense perspective. We have Ankur over here who comes from cloud business background, and he wears two hats with being a CISO himself and also a provider. And we have Ajay, who has been involved a lot in the non-governmental space and policy framework in cybersecurity space, as well as he's pursuing his law. So we'll be looking a lot of insights from him as well. So quick introduction on the topic, agility and flexibility in finance, cloud, telecom, and infra. Why these four industry? All data is moving to cloud. It's already there or it's going to move in next 5 years. We don't know where it is. We have no visibility, no control over our data. Telecom, pretty much every service is being delivered over the network now. We buy on telecom services, we consume services, we order food, everything, personal data, financial data, lot of transaction, everything with telecom operator. They're processing it, they're storing it. Then we have financial, still a biggest motivation for cyber crimes to target. We saw in the recent Swift attack. And finally, critical infra, a new trend we have seen after Stuxnet, with the Ukraine power grid, along with that, the US dam that was attacked, a lot of attack on industrial system to cripple an economy temporarily to further any geopolitical agenda, right? So we are looking at all that, and that's why this topic is very pertinent today. So with that background, I would like to ask my first question to Ankur. Ankur, how do you see your customers, how is their appetite for cloud adoption with the background of pros and cons that come with cloud adoption?
All right, so as a telecom provider, we were the obvious target for most of the attacks. Many of the organizations usually come later as the target for the cyber attackers. But as a telecom provider, we have always been the primary target for most of the attacks that have been launched. And as somebody which is across the globe, we are present in over 180 countries. The journey to the cloud wasn't very easy. I would say we are still not quite there. We are also adopting the cloud as the market, but we have been the early adopters for the cloud for many reasons. Long back, the ultimate enabler for the cloud was the computing requirements. The bigger the computing requirements for an organization, the sooner you would look at the cloud. Today, the landscape has changed. Today, the security is driving the cloud adoption. From our perspective, being a telecom provider, we had the cloud ourselves, so it wasn't that hard, but it was as tough for any organization which is global today. We had the same regulatory and the compliance framework to operate in. And we took our time, but we moved most of our applications and services to our own cloud today, of course. It's a mix of a public, private, on-prem, hybrid model, as you call it. So we took our time to decide what applications are perfect for a public cloud environment, what applications should remain within a private cloud, and what should always be within an on-prem. And the same knowledge also goes back to our customers, where we are helping them guide towards the cloud adoption based on the regulatory and the compliance framework that they operate in. But computing has been the biggest enabler. To give you a simple example, most of the corporates today, if you look at it, typically a SIM as a technology, you do the sizing based on events per second. Most of the small and medium corporates work on events per second of 1,000 or 1,500. If you look at company of a BT size, we ingest 1 million events per second. So that's the kind of a computing environment we operate in, which is practically not possible to do it with a simple on-prem model.
Thanks, Ankur. So quick question, what are the challenges your customer face in cloud adoption today? And how are you planning to address them, especially in the cybersecurity context?
All right. So I would say people used to believe the security is the biggest inhibitor of the cloud adoption. I would say more than security, it's around the compliance framework. So most of the customers today talk to us about the compliance framework before going to the cloud. How we are trying to address it, I would be honest, it's not as easy as I can simply sell it. Most of the cloud providers are today struggling. I would say in two things. If we get two things right, many customers would be willing to move to the cloud. One is transparency. Now, gone are the days when you would not be transparent enough to tell your customers where the data on the cloud is. So when we started, we would never disclose where the customer data is going, which country, which data center, and which servers. But today with the transparent model, we are obligated to disclose where the data is moving so that we can make sure that the customer's regulatory and compliance requirements are met in terms of where the data is hosted. And the second point is around the SLA. Now, SLAs is something which still needs a lot of work today. We have come a long way in terms of giving the SLAs which meets the enterprise requirement. But most of the cloud providers, including us, I would say, we are still not at the place where I can give you the SLA based on your penalties. Today, I give you my own penalties. The cloud providers give you penalties for their SLA breaches, which do not replicate the same penalties that you may be obligated to deal. For example, a simple GDPR, right? A GDPR obligates you to give either a 20 million kind of a penalty or a 4% of a turnover. Now, as none of the cloud providers would give you the same level of penalties back. I would only give you these SLA breaches based on my penalty environment. So we are getting there. I think the cloud providers, including us, are working out how best the SLAs can be made tailor-made to the different industries that we operate in.
Thanks, Ankur. Good insight. With that, let me move to a different part of the topic. With the new way we consume services today, which are essential for us, the definition of critical infra is also shifting. I would like view from you, Colonel Inderjit. How do you define the critical infrastructure ecosystem as it is today? What are the challenges and trends over there?
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll just take on from where Ankur left, and then I'll come into the critical infrastructure. Like you all aware that there are so many smart cities which are going to come up, and do you think those have a security challenges in between amongst themselves? Yes, no. And if I say that everything in the cloud which is going to be there is going to be on the edge, all your computing which is going to be there on the edge, and you're going to have a data center-less environment, will you believe that? Yes, that's going to be. It's going to be all fog computing, and it's going to be edge computing. All your IoT devices are going to be intelligent enough where they're going to have their own computing power. So nothing of your compute, which we are doing in the data center, huge data which is flowing, that will not be flowing to and fro. The case in point, the Sophia robot, you have the edge computing, and the best example of edge computing and fog computing, because that's how she is being able to give you all the answer interactively without communicating back with the data center, or because machine learning and AI is another part of it, but the computing is done at the edge. So that's going to be one of the big challenges as regards the smart cities are concerned. Now, if you're aware that there are almost 16 sectors which have been identified as a critical information infrastructure. Like case in point is your banking, your power, your road transport, your telecom, your health, energy. There are 16. And should we take, if I look at it, do we say, are we ready for any threat to all the critical infrastructure? Are we ready for it? Yes, no? The reason? We can be louder. Let's have interactive because we got a very composite team. I think let's have a, rather than be a monologue, let's have a very interactive session that will give us, quite an interesting talk, right? Please. Yeah, I think there's somewhere down the chain we have the policy implementation or the will to do it is not there. Like the example which I give you, 2017 budget, we allocated almost 1,000 CR for building up a FinCert. And today we are sitting half 2018. I think the RFI or the RFP also not come, and most of the attacks which are happening today is on the banking sector. Okay, any threat which is happening is never getting reported. Most of the banks, they never tell that they had any malware which was there in their networks, or their networks came down, or their ATMs came down. The reason that they don't want to declare it because it will be a loss of reputation. Similarly is the case with the power. Similarly is the case with your telecom networks or the energy. What in the opening remark we spoke of the Stuxnet. That was a live target which happened. And if you're not reporting any critical information infrastructure attack, it's not that everything is all right. It is that there's something wrong in our knowing about what's happening in the network. We are failing in implementation of those kind of policies, procedures, doing the vulnerability assessment, doing the penetration testing. I'll give you an example. Last few days back, I was in a seminar similar, and he said, we have been insulated, we have everything insulated, we don't connect to the internet, and I still said, your network will come down. So, when I asked him, did you do a penetration testing and vulnerability assessment, he said, what is that? Okay, so we are living in a world of hallucination where we see or say that we are secure, but we are not. And it's only a time will tell that how far or how fast we implement the critical information infrastructure securities in place. If you look at all the 16 sectors or for the critical information infrastructure, they're all certs are supposed to come up. Certs at the central level, cert at the state level. State level, it will take care of all the smart cities which are going to come up, because today, whatever smart cities are coming up, they are coming up with bare-bone security. People who are dealing with security part of the smart cities, they very well know that how much secure their complete networks are. Okay, and we are just waiting for the incident to happen. With the moment you are connecting the smart cities to a network, you're open. The complete threat landscape is open, right? So the other part which I want to take on is the banking sector, the finance sector, which is quite open or a very big threat landscape today. Okay, where we are earlier talking of the DLP or the IPS or the IDS solutions, which we used to say that we are secure enough. Today, the complete security shift has taken to the endpoint, like your fog computing, which I started with. Similarly, the endpoint security has become the most important thing. Even in the endpoint, it's not about monitoring your machine. It's monitoring your human behavior. That has become very important. User access management is very important. Case in point, your PNB bank keys. Had that been monitored, the user would have monitored, that case would have never happened. Like there are almost 67% of your attacks in any network are the insider attacks. It's not that you're going to have an attack from outside which is going to bring down your networks. It's your inside attack which is going to damage the networks much more than outside attack. And it's insiders. So the user access behavior, your decoys, which are going to play a major role in next level of your security, those are the things what we are going to talk of. AI and ML, of course, is the enablers or the technology enablers which are going to be what we are going to talk of in the case of the finance sector security. So these are some of my thoughts on the various aspects. So we'll carry forward with the further discussion.
Thanks, Colonel, for those insightful words. So let me take a switch on the third aspect, which we haven't touched so far, and ask Ajay this. What are the legal implications and records available today in case of a cybersecurity breach, Ajay? And what should our CISO community should have in mind to address them?
Right, so we have distinguished lawyer, advocate Neeraj Arora. I'm just a student still, so pardon me for if there is something which is not exact, but so everybody who goes into business, so the day we start a business, we have to think on from the regulatory perspective and the legal aspects of that, because with whomsoever we do business with, it's basically a contract, and contract always have some implications and legal requirements. For example, if you open a private enterprise, you have corporate laws, then what kind of business you are into, depending on that, there are legal implications. So if you are into foreign currency exchange, or let's say stock exchange, you have SEBI, they have their own regulatory requirements, they have their own audits. Telecom, there are tri-regulations, and over and above we have IT Act 2000, 2008 amendments, and then IT regulations which came in 2011. So at each aspect we have to think from a legal perspective, because it's just not that once you do a business, you put things in contract, you are saved. So most of the times what happens is, there is a saying in the security world, you don't drown because you get into the water. You drown because either you don't know how to swim, or either you did not take actions so that in case you get into the water, you can save yourself. So the problem is not exactly at the level of doing the business. It's at the level of, have you put in controls in order to make sure that all the regulatory requirement, contractual requirements are completed. And so what happens is, most of the time at a very senior level, most of the reports, they are coming from, the approach is from the bottom to the top. But what is exactly happening at the ground level is many times fails, because the reports goes pretty good. The flow charts are good, the pictorial presentations are good, but what exactly is at the ground level? So I have been into many audits and many other places. So each area, they would have their own trade secrets. For example, somebody is running some Linux administrator. So they would know that what exactly is happening on the system, but most of the times the auditor which comes over there, they would not be the experts into the auditing of that particular area. So that brings a gap. Now, the audit report shows something, all right, these guys have passed the audit. But what happens when there is a breach, or some attacker goes in and they find out that particular loophole which they did not show into their own evidences, there the actual problem comes in. So what a CISO can do? So there are requirements that, for example, in GDPR itself, or most of the privacy laws, they have to report within 48 to 70 hours, 72 hours to all the affected people. But they don't do it. They think that probably they would able to prevent it, they would contain it, but as soon as information goes out, then everybody goes into saving their own asses. I'm sorry for the word, but that's how the people does. So there the big blame game starts. So we have seen lots and lots of breaches. For example, everybody talked about Equifax. So almost 28 million was paid in class action lawsuit. But it was not just the financial issue, the money which they had to pay. There were, the CISO has to step down. There were a lot of firing within the organization, and on top of that, the amount of brand value loss they had, that cannot be compared just with the financial losses. So the amount of uh, regulations which we have, which we need to follow, first of all, the organization need to understand that what exactly the law is saying. A bad interpretation of the law can actually lead you into similar situation. So you need to have a very sound legal team, as well as you need to have people who understand the technology aspect as well as the legal aspect. Because most of the time, the people who are into the law, they would have very rudimentary knowledge about the IT technologies. For example, let's say there is a lawyer, he has to understand what exactly is going into the firewall. So probably they would be able to understand at a smaller level, but not enough technical knowledge he would have. So you need to have a balanced team. So everybody should sit together while working around the technologies, so that there should be the legal team, there should be the people, for example, the HR people who should understand the people aspect as well. So one of the most painful area where most of the breaches happens and the less amount of investment happens is on the people. So my understanding on the security breaches or onto the security level is a bit different, because what I think is that the technology we develop, it's developed by the people. The processes, the machine follow a particular process, a set of instructions that is again defined by the people. And the process within which the organization work, that is again run by the people, processes defined by the people. So it's the most important part is the people. We need to make sure that people understand what exactly they have to do and how it has to be done, and what could be the repercussions, or what could be the problems that an organization or even at the country level things can be faced. So the human aspect is one of the most important part, and even the law talks a lot about the human behavior, and they talk about you need to put reasonable restrictions or reasonable controls. But what is reasonable is again the point of interpretation of the law. So my point of view is that all the CISOs need to make sure that the time they would have to go into a contract or while doing business on a regular basis, they would probably sit with their legal team, technology team, and the people manager who manages the most of the organization resources. They would sit together and then probably define the policies, procedures, and the controls for the organization, so that in case they would have a breach, at least they would be able to prove in the court of law that they have given enough restrictions or the processes were in place, so that they would not be able, they would not have to pay so much damages, as well as within the market, people would know and their reputation would not be affected as badly as it could have been if they would not have taken enough actions.
Thanks, Ajay. A pretty interesting point indeed. You know, while we are trying to block a lot of automated threats, it's humans are the weakest link, and that usually left unaddressed social engineering aspect, which causes almost 80% of the breaches. Talking about breach, let me invite Ankur again. You are a CISO yourself, Ankur. How would you, would you like to share some example of the breaches you have seen in your experience, and how would you advise your fellow CISOs over here to deal with them?
All right, so I thought about it before, but after the case studies that Dr. Triveni shared, I think no matter what I say, it won't be interesting. So I'll keep it generic. So, so most of the attacks, typically happen by the cyber attackers basically uses the stealth and surprise, right? So it's a three-step process. You distract, you disrupt, and you steal. right? So that's just standard ideology used by most of the cyber attackers. And most of the attacks that you would see have not been very sophisticated. Of course, there have been sophisticated attacks and you have sophisticated technologies to take care of them, but most of the attacks have happened because of the basic misses. Maybe the system wasn't patched, maybe there was a human error, or maybe you left a loophole, right? You deploy systems, then you forget about it. There is no regular management, maintenance. Nobody is there, as Dr. Triveni said, nobody is monitoring the data, right? So I would say it's the more we can move to the cloud. So if we would have used the cloud providers, the basic misses would not have been there. As cloud providers, we always take care of the basic processes that needs to be followed all the time. Now, people may say that the cloud opens up a lot of vulnerabilities for an enterprise. I would say look at the positive side. The amount of counterintelligence data that a cloud generates, that will also help you to predict the attacks much in advance. You will have the entire multi-stage attacks predicted much before they actually happen. So cloud is actually opening up new possibilities for you. As an organization, we are one of the few organizations who deploy offensive security. So we are not just about defensive security. We go after the attackers too. Now having that cloud, having that enormous amount of information available to us helps us go after the attackers even before they try to attack you, right?
Yeah, thank you, Ankur. So let me ask Colonel Inderjit.
I'll add to it.
Yeah, okay, sure. Please go ahead.
The threats and the attacks. No, one of the use case, did we hear about the drone attacks on the Venezuelan president? We did that. That is one of the kind of a critical information infrastructure attack. That was a one which is very live. Second, which is very much in vogue or very much talked about in the hacker circuit, is everybody heard about the aircraft F-35? F-35? Lockheed Martin, the most costliest fighter aircraft. And practically this aircraft gives you the complete situational awareness in the command and control center down below. And you can manage the complete logistics, your side-winger missiles, your bombs, your fuel, your track, everything. Okay? And to tell you, this is number one on the target of the hackers, to hack a flying F-35 today. Why? Because this is all technology enabled. It's got most amount of IoT sensors on board. Maximum amount of IoT sensors. Third example, we've been flying in all the aircrafts today, okay? All the commercial aircrafts. And we have a pen drive port which is always there. And though it was made with a very good intention that people will be able to charge their mobiles or something like that, whereas that has become the most vulnerable point in the aircraft, wherein that aircraft can be hacked from that pen drive port, because you can inject the malware and you can hack an aircraft while flying. So these are some of the so very critical examples which are there today. And I can go on and on, some of them which already happened, some of the ones which are going to happen. One example which I like to quote, again, not only the critical infrastructure, it is on the can you tell them to stop a bit? It's actually disturbing. Yeah. I'll request to keep the tempers low, that side, please, Yeah. Sorry. The American elections which are being, hacked. And fortunately, unfortunately, I had posted a post on LinkedIn and I got so many comments on that particular post, pro and cons. And people were saying it happened. Some people said why it didn't happen. To tell you the fact, it happened. And it was due to the phishing attack or the spear phishing technology which was used to hack into those people, into the government officials, the DNC part. And the psychology war was being played. The psychological war was so played that The release of the emails and the date of the elections was just 5 to 6 days. People can't think. And they voted against Hillary Clinton, and the other, Donald Trump won. Okay? It's not only that critical infrastructure is something, a building which is there. This is a kind of, can be on a nation to nation, nation to the systems, system to system, system to people. You know, it's all possible today. And these are some of the examples which we should always take cue to get ready for. And believe you me, or take it in mind, elections in 2019 is around the corner. Okay? And let's be very careful how the psychological war is being played in our case as well. It's going to be done. Okay? Social media is already very active. And we get carried away by a lot of fake news, a lot of news which come, and we start believing. So these are the challenges which are live, which are all happening today, and we should be all aware of it.
So, as Colonel Inderjit Singh said about psychological warfare, so as I said earlier as well, the human part. So, if you see, we talked about a lot about the Stuxnet, F-35 and all that, but does people know actually from which point all these things happened? The Stuxnet was a very, very complex malware which has a built-in some kind of AI as well. It was a 2 MB malware. At that point of time, it was the biggest one. But how did that get into the Iranian nuclear facility? That was the most important part. So what the very basic thing was done was around the nuclear facilities. So these guys dropped a lot of USB sticks. And just one guy took it up, connected into the SCADA system, and the entire system was compromised. And if everybody knows the repercussion, it could have led into a nuclear blast as well. So that amount of damage could have been done. Equifax, there was an Apache server which they were using. The vulnerability was reported in March. Till August, they did not do anything, and they got hacked. Similarly, there was the entire exploit kit which was hacked by hackers from the NSA. And there was a service which was run wherein you can buy zero-day vulnerabilities on a subscription base for $25,000 a month. And those vulnerabilities were bought, and everybody talks about ransomware and all that stuff, but the core area from where they were doing the infection, the zero-day vulnerabilities, were actually taken from those exploits which were bought from the NSA hack. So Shadow Brokers was the group of hackers who actually hacked into NSA, and they got all the exploits and payloads. So those were used by the hackers in order to go through WannaCry and all those ransomware which came in. So these kind of vulnerabilities keeps on popping up. But again, as an organization, what we are doing, are we reluctant or neglecting all these things would create trouble. Even F-35. So there is a similar program which is run by China, which they have made a similar aircraft, which is J-22. How they got the entire technology is they actually were able to hack into RSA encryption. So they have the soft tokens and hard tokens, which keeps on generating random number on the basis of encryption. So the hackers were able to compromise one of the organization which was a trusted partner for RSA. They got into there, then they hacked into the RSA, got the keys, then they moved on to Lockheed Martin, stealing all the blueprints for F-35 and used, without paying a single dollar, probably, yes, they do invested into the hacking attempts and all that stuff, but not doing any research, they were able to replicate almost similar kind of specifications into their J-22 fighter aircraft. So that amount of cyber espionage is happening every day. And every day we go on to social media, or let's say, forget about social media. We have been brainwashed and programmed since the TV has arrived. So if we have to say TV program, so why does it call as a program? Because they are actually programming you. They are playing with the emotions. Every commercial or advertisement which is done over the TV or some or the other area, it's very, very important that they connect with the people, and how they connect is actually affecting our emotional and mental health. And similar things are used by hackers every day while doing social engineering in order to get our organization. So are we prepared, or have we made our resources aware about that what kind of plays can be done? So if we are not, then probably we should move into that arena, give them training, put them into such situations where they have to handle these kind of attacks without knowing that what could be the repercussions, and see what are their responses and take the steps further.
Thanks, Ajay. Yeah, sure, Ankur. Please
so,
go ahead.
so since we're talking about attacks, so one of the attacks, most of the attacks that I have seen so far, they all carry financial losses. Most of the organizations have been able to recover after a financial loss. But one of the country level attacks that I've seen, where the hackers literally made a mockery of the entire country, it happened with Saudi Arabia. Before they deployed the entire national security covering all the critical infra, they were attacked by another country. I would not name it, it's not confirmed yet, but let's call it a group. So the group hacked into the entire country's military plans, and they released all the basic information on the YouTube, and all the specific military plans were auctioned on every Friday. And that continued for almost a year. Entire country could not trace who the hackers were, who the buyers are. So the entire military plan had to got changed for the entire country. So the repercussions are really, really huge.
Thanks, Ankur. So we agree that it's not Hollywood movie stuff anymore. It's happening to us. So with that, I would like to invite some questions from the audience on the subject that you may want to ask the panel. Anyone from the audience? Yeah, please, sir. Let me bring mic to you, actually. Okay.
So we just touched in the topic of elections, and how a hacking process can actually influence all these incidents by, hosting fake news and all this. So what are the remediation or mitigation plans? How do we counter these, and how do we avoid this kind of a fiasco what US, Russia has landed themselves into? Thank you.
Should I answer? Uh, One solution which I can tell you right now, there are a lot of options they are working on, is your social media monitoring at the ISP level itself. Okay? Before it's being filtered out to the people and then start circulating, and it gets replicated in numbers which we don't control. If you're monitoring your social media at the source, at your ISP before it actually gets pumped out, okay, that's a solution which is the people are looking in for. Though ready solution is not available, okay, there are a lot of work which is already on. Darknet is the only source for this kind of solution, but that is also not kind of authenticated, whether it work or not. But that will be the only methodology which will safeguard, one of the methodology, I'll not say the only, sorry, one of the methodology that can safeguard these kind of fake news getting into the public domain.
So there are other methods as well. For example, using of AI and machine learning, probably authenticating the news itself at multiple levels. For example, let's say some news surfaced on social media. Now, the AI bots probably can surf into the net and check, is there some other source of that information as well? If it's not, probably they can flag it and give a person visibility that the source of the information could not be found, and probably they need to check. From my understanding, the most important part would be that uh, the awareness would be the most important aspects, wherein we can let people know that before even forwarding any news, or once you read any news, probably you should check the other sources as well, because the amount of information flows in social media and over the internet, it's very, very hard in current situation to be controlled. So it's next to impossible. It could be generated from the same country, from the outside. So there are multiple ways of generation. So probably the awareness within the people is the most important aspect.
Add to the AI, you can add a blockchain. Okay, blockchain-based fake news, where you can identify the fake news if it's there, because it doesn't have origin. You can always find out it's not going to be circulated. So that is also going to be one of the solutions. And there are a lot of startups which are working on it. If you go to the net, you find a lot of startups working on these kind of news identification and authentication, which are available. But then those are not in a productionized model. They are more in a POC stage, and it's only a time will tell that how they are going to function, how they're going to work in a mass internet era.
All right. I guess
Yeah,
we are
I
on top
have
of our-
one question.
Yeah, please go ahead. We'll take
In
your question.
infrastructure or critical infrastructure or data center or clouds, most of the top IT brand companies, they say data is fully safe. Data either is stored in the database or when it travels through the network, data is fully encrypted using a particular mechanism. If hackers hacks the data, they cannot actually decrypt it. The top brands, I do not want to quote the name of the organization, they say it is fully encrypted. Data is stolen, they cannot decrypt. So my question is, what are the other mechanisms we should implement in infrastructure, critical infrastructure, or data center, or in clouds? What are the other mechanisms and what are their sequences? Can you please tell me?
This is a very long question. I'll take it offline. But I can only tell you one thing. When they say data is encrypted, I will also say, when I go to the customer and say that your data is safe, nothing's going to happen to your data. Only thing, if you read all the reports, 67% of your hacks today are happening through your internal clients or insiders. 67. Okay? It's only 33% which they are telling you APTs, DDoS, all those kind of attacks. What are you going to do about the 67% of the attacks which are there? They don't have solution for it. And if you recollect what I told you, till date we are only monitoring the machines. What about the human factor which is controlling that machines? Okay, they are the culprit for taking away the data. I go to I have a user access, I take the file, take a printout which I don't require. If I'm in a financial institution, I am limited to a particular amount of currency which I can handle. I try and open a file which I am not authorized to, or I upload into a Google Drive. Okay, pass it off. What about that? So they don't have a solution for this. That's why I told you, when we are talking of the encryption at the middle or the core, IPS, IDS, UTMS, all those DLP, everybody gives a solution. Endpoint, not the endpoint is important. User access behavior in the endpoint. That is the most important part of it. So there is no one shoe fit all solution which I can tell you right now. But yes, we can discuss it offline. We can give you a perspective point by point.
So just
Thank you, sir.
just to add on to his question, there are laws in a country like Korea for certain category of businesses that it is mandatory to encrypt the data. So do you think same kind is going to happen in country like India, or it should be there? Because it can be really helpful, I think.
We have Dr. Neeraj Arora, who's going to be talking about the data protection. And you are aware that there's always a data protection law or the data protection bill which is going to be passed in due course of time. So those are the ones which are going to take care of. GDPR in Europe, which has already been implemented. You have seen the repercussion. Anybody having a touch point with any European country, there's a lot of heat which they're feeling now. Similar kind of heat we are going to feel when this particular bill gets passed in toto. It's just in a draft form, but there are a lot of smoke on the finding itself. So in times to come, you'll come to know how it's going to work. But definitely there's an encryption requirement of data. Case in point, your health record. In US, you cannot send it outside your four walls of your country. In our country, we are sending all the transcripts from A country to B country and C country. We don't know where it's going. We don't have those kind of protection laws which safeguard the user data. Okay, leave aside the encryption part of it. So we are far, far behind on those aspects. It's only, it will take a lot of time to catch up with the other countries on those, cybersecurity policies or rules or the regulations for the encryption part of it.
Thank you, Colonel. In the interest of time, we'll not be able to take any more questions from the audience, but we'll be around, the panel will be around to answer your questions offline. I'll request Ajay to quickly summarize the session we had. Thank you for the engagement for this. Ajay, over to you to quickly summarize.
All right, so before even summarize, as a lot of people were asking questions about the encryption, so there are two most important things in the encryption probably you would have to see is how many bit level of encryption, what kind of encryption you're using, and it's not the encryption which is hacked, it's actually the implementation problems, how they have implemented. So if you can audit the way they have implemented the encryption, most of the vulnerabilities are found from there itself. So those two things are taken care, most of the organization would be fine if they have something like FIPS 142 in level of encryption. So summarizing on, so we touch based on the what are the challenges we have faced, we currently face, and probably within the future also we would face in terms of cybersecurity and within different organizations, different industries. And we also did talk about what could be done with respect to infrastructure, the controls that could be implemented, and what can be done within the legal aspects as well. Also the human factor we talked about. So I think we have covered most of the areas of the security. So that's it. Thanks.
Right, thank you, Ankur. Thanks, Ajay. Thanks, Colonel Inder, for joining us. Thank you, audience, for being engaged. Hope this was helpful, and Dharna, over to you.